All right, everyone, welcome back to another amazing guest expert interview. We have Kira on with us to talk about, I don't know if anyone's excited as I am, but to talk about shame and just like the ways that sometimes as moms we feel like bad moms, we feel guilty, we're ridden with shame, and just how we can really fight that because most of the time, actually almost all the time, we're wrong. So thank you so much for joining us, Kira.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you were the first person I thought about when I thought about like we need to have this conversation. So before we dive in, I would love for you to just share more about yourself and kind of what brought you to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I am a licensed mental health therapist. I specialize in shame resilience and radical acceptance. So, really, what that means is helping people reframe and change their stories. So, it's less about I'm a terrible person or I'm not enough. I've got to prove my worth to be a good enough mom, to be a good enough partner, a good enough entrepreneur, whatever that is. And then the radical acceptance piece is really about reframing the way we think about control, focusing on what we can control, what we can't control, and how to shift our relationship with the things that are outside of our control. And I think, like many people that get into the field of mental health, of wellness, there's some sort of personal story. And so for me, it was a lot of trial and error with my own supports, therapists, doctors, other wellness people that I worked with, and kind of figuring out what served me, but also some gaps in what was available to me and wanting to kind of fill those gaps. And when I was getting my master's in counseling psychology, I sort of stumbled on the early teachings of Brene Brown. And as soon as I learned what shame was, I sort of immersed myself there. And that was my focus, was on that side of it. And then the more that I did this work, it's now I want to talk about shame resilience. I want to help people know what it is, why we have it, how it got there, but then really how to shift it. And I'm also a mom to gosh, she's going to be 4 this month, which is just an interesting experience. She was born 2 weeks before the pandemic. So it's this weird marker of time for me, of also this like cumulative kind of transformation process and the collective trauma that we all went through. And so I think coming on and doing this with you is really important to me because even in my own shame resilience journey, the shame we feel as moms, the shame that we feel as mom entrepreneurs, and I have one kid, but I think moms to multiple kids, the shame we feel about choosing, or if we don't choose whether or not we want kids, and if our bodies can handle, like there's so much. And it is, I think, a topic that I'm still really having to actively work on for myself. And I think if we could have more honest and open conversations, it could really change the motherhood experience for a lot of us.
Yes, yes, and yes. I just think, I mean, I just think the way you talk about it's just so inviting to have this conversation. And so,
Mm.
you know, I think many people might be familiar with Brene Brown. Maybe they're familiar with the word shame, but like, how would you describe shame?
Yeah, shame, I think about, so we have kind of our core facets of how we show up in the world. There's our thoughts or all those cognitions in our brain. There's our feelings, our emotions, and then our actions. Shame is an emotion. It is really, it's a fear-based emotion. And it's essentially the fear of not being good enough, not belonging, not being worthy of love, connection, whatever it is. The kind of interesting thing is that shame, the emotion itself, carries no weight if it's not tied to some sort of cognition. And so shame really gets its legs because most of us have a negative, what we call in the cognitive behavioral world, core belief. And so the idea, and many people maybe have heard the term limiting beliefs, but it's that idea of if you think of the central most one sentence story about your life, what is it? And for most of us, it's I am not enough. I am not enough. I don't deserve love. I'm not doing a good enough job. I have to do more. People don't want me around. People will leave. So that thought is really the fuel source of shame. And then what we see is essentially shame, or that emotional place when we aren't dealing with it. It's showing up in how we act in our lives with other people, towards ourselves. It's a feedback on more of those negative thoughts. So I think if people were to kind of come down into it, it's the belief of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not lovable enough, something enough. And you're living your life in a constant state of fear and therefore trying to make up for that belief. I need connection and belonging. So I have to make sure that everybody thinks I'm worthy. So my shame is going to tell me, well, then you better be the mom that's rotating those books every 2 weeks. And you better make sure that you've done all of those TikTok activities and the Pinterest boards of how everything is supposed to look. And oh, you don't have a Montessori style playroom and you haven't done this. And how often have you done these things? Those become the checklists that our shame says, if you just follow this, you'll be good enough. You'll be okay. And then this whole cycle, we don't have to deal with this anymore. But what we know and what we've learned is that that's not true. It just actually keeps us stuck in the cycle. And even though shame thinks it's helping, it thinks it's doing the solution or giving us the solution, it's really just keeping us stuck chasing this idea of enough instead of claiming that we might not do enough all the time or feel like we are the people we want to be. And we as people are inherently deserving of claiming enough.
I mean, there's so much I could say from what you said, but I think the biggest thing I think is taking away that like we have this innate desire and need to belong and to feel loved and to like know that's everyone, right? So
Yeah.
don't feel like you're needy if you're like I want love. It's what we all want, but yet we're so afraid of not getting that or being
Mm-hmm.
told that we're not enough for that that it's almost like we set ourselves sometimes we set ourselves up for that to be true. I just remember when I first
Right.
met Brene Brown, just like she's like, if you're looking for a reason not to belong, you'll find one. And
Yeah.
I just was like, oh my shoot, like you're right.
Yeah.
Like find it. You just gotta go open your Instagram app and then you'll find it over and
Mm-hmm.
over and over. And so
Mm-hmm.
and I just and I wonder for you who's been in this field for a while, like what so obviously shame is something we've dealt with throughout centuries, but do you feel like moms more than ever, because when you were talking about the Montessori and the changing the books,
Yeah.
like I don't remember moms that I knew who when they were moms, you knew moms X amount of years ago, like dealing with the exact same thing. I'm like,
Right.
is the like has there been a shift of like now I'm exposed to all these new things and I feel like I need to do all that? So yeah, what has been your kind of just like your oversight of seeing like I don't know, just like, do you feel like we're experiencing more shame than we used to, or we're just, I don't know. I don't know what my question
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I mean, I think, for a lot of us, I think back to, our parents or caregivers and how they raised us or how their parents raised them. Community was such a more contained idea, and people weren't going to each other's house comparing whether or not your house was the cleaner one or how like what kind of toys you had or if you did the best review or when your kid was doing X, Y, and Z. There was a lot more just, I think, ownership of your unit, a lot of leaning on each other for support, but the pressure was different. And so what I think about now, we know inherently social media is a net negative. You can try all you want to say that there are positives. It makes you feel better. It's your downturn. Like at the end of the day, it helps you feel good. It doesn't. It feeds on, it is literally written, the algorithm is written to leave you wanting to come back to find the next answer. So you get a hit, you get a dopamine hit that you feel good enough. And it could be something like, here, this is this great play activity you're going to do with your baby. And then they're going to want to do tummy time and it's going to be amazing. So you feel like, okay, I've got the answer. And then it's not going to work, or it's only going to work a little bit. Now you got to come back to it, or you're stuck on the next thing. It does a lot more comparison and sort of norm pressure than it does service to we're all fucking up, regardless of what we think we're doing. Like, I am a shame based therapist, and I constantly have to revisit what I'm doing. I know how to communicate and work through, I can teach nonviolent communication, I can teach problem solving. I have worked with families for 10 years about how to communicate through conflict. That doesn't mean that I don't lose my cool with my own kid. And so when you sort of realize that when we put things up here, we're putting sort of stakes and again, those inadvertent check boxes. If I do this, I'll feel good enough. If I act this way, if I look this way, if I follow this diet, if I buy this person's really cute sweat outfit that they're showing me, or I learn to garden, everything's going to feel better. And when it doesn't, and we stay stuck chasing it, I think that's what really affects us. And I think particularly, obviously, I wish this wasn't the case. We're still in a time where moms are doing the majority, or women caregivers are doing the majority of the work with the kids, even if they're working outside of the home. It is still statistically the norm. And so part of that is also, I think, we are just looking for a sense of community, particularly during COVID when we couldn't get it in our communities out the door. We turned to social media and we got answers, we got ideas. But really, what that did, I think about a client of mine who had a baby about to be 2 years old this next month. So 2 years ago, still kind of in the midst of the pandemic. And all she was doing was just searching for the answer. Why is my kid not doing this? What about this? Oh my gosh, this person's kid is walking. My kid is this age and they're not walking. And what about this? And oh my goodness, he seems to have a harder time doing these activities than these 10 people that are doing this on Instagram. So I must be doing something wrong. And I think because our brains are wired to see where we are screwing up, to try to control everything ourselves, we don't see that information and go, how beautiful that everybody's kid is different. How cool that this kid is doing this at 10 months, mine took 12 or 13, or how cool that this person has this style. We see it as, how are you not doing enough? And that's just how our brains are wired. And so, long story short, yes, I think it's harder. And I think it's that mix of we're still doing the bulk of the work. The pressure to do it all and be it all feels even higher. And what we buy into as a form of connection, I think, is ultimately preying on that desire to outperform our shame story so that we can prove that we are the good enough mom, the good enough partner, the good enough homeowner, whatever that is.
Mhm. I was just reading a book on postnatal depletion. It's actually by
Mm,
this male doctor. Have you read it?
but it's on my list and I've heard such good things
Right,
about it.
same. And like the library had it, and I was like, yes, because I want to do another summit, particularly on pregnancy and postpartum, because
Yeah,
I just think there's so what you're saying, so many like misconceptions. And one of the things he said, and I just was like, this is it. Like basically, it's not like moms are doing anything. Like moms have, we've had to do the role of like, creating the baby, keeping it, and do
right.
all these things. But now there's these extra pressures. But
Yes.
also he said now, but the center of like community and support looks different.
Yeah.
And how that also, so the, I mean, your baby's not sleeping and some babies do sleep, but all these things really add on to a mom's like emotional, mental, and physical well-being. And
Hmm.
with that, that's why I think there is a rise. And then, yeah, you have social media where you're like looking for an answer. Like, where do we go?
Right.
We have a question. We like Google or Instagram,
Yep.
Pinterest. And it's not that those things are bad, but when you're in that state, it's almost like you have to like watch the state you're in when you go search for
Yeah.
answers. Because if
Conscious
you're
consumption.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, am I looking just to find out? I'm looking to consume. Do not go look while your baby is sleeping at 3 a.m. in the morning. You're just
Yeah.
not in a good space. But so I just think, I think, I know I resonate with a lot of what you said, and so probably a lot of other moms. So if we are wanting to like move from a place of like being, well, shame driven to like more shame resilient, like how do we one
Hmm.
recognize that we're acting out of shame? And then how can we act differently?
One of the things I think a lot about is so I notice this with my partner. So I'm in a heterosexual relationship and so my husband, her dad, we will have an interaction with Everly and it'll be a hard one. Sleep, she's got newfound independence. Sleep's been a thing that we've navigated. We learned she was ready to drop her nap. We did it. But it's been interesting to walk through that. And there are times where maybe a hard conversation has to happen. I have to set a boundary. Like it just sucks. I mean, we had a wonderful bedtime routine and now you're ruining it. Like get back in your bed. And now I leave feeling like the jerk for what happened. What I think about is how long do you hold on to and ruminate on whatever that interaction was? So I think that's sort of a reflection number one question. I will sit and ruminate on that all night. I will sometimes in the morning, the next morning, like I'll be like, am I am I the asshole? Did I do something wrong? Am I a bad parent? Am I a bad mom? Do you think that she knows that I love her? Like I will stay there a lot longer than he does. And so one thing, and not again to compare, because he still has shame, he still has his own stories, he still struggles with his story as a dad too. But sometimes it's just sort of noticing, do I have a tendency to hold on to stories maybe longer than is either helpful for me or than maybe people around me? Am I ruminating? You have an interaction with somebody, how long are you holding on to that? Like if I interact with somebody at the gym, am I thinking about did I say the wrong thing the rest of the day? Or am I able to say, oh, maybe that was an awkward conversation, moving on. So I think first is just kind of paying attention to how long do I hold that? I think the second thing in line with that is noticing what's my general storyline about myself as a mom. So we're thinking specifically about motherhood. And it could be any role too. But when I just sort of naturally think about what thoughts do I have about me as a parent, what do they look like? For the majority of us that are really stuck in the shame, they're going to be negative. Somehow you screwed up, you did something wrong. And, or they're going to be, what's the answer? I've got to figure it out. The pressure is on me. So again, really sort of an overemphasis on you being the one in control and you should be able to handle it all and do it all. I think the third element to sort of question at the end of this, and I will give you all the answer right now, you all have shame. Every single one of us has it, and you're all doing this. So the answer is going to be yes to a lot of these questions, but I think it's helpful to break it down yourself. So the third thing to think about is whenever you have a should, I should do this, I'm supposed to do this, I have to do this, follow that up with why. Why is that important to you? I think about, for many of us, we think about feeding our kids. We really want our kids to have a healthy diet. That's something, whatever healthy means to you, that's something that most people can agree on, that that's a goal for them. There's also a point in time where healthy becomes misconstrued with shame. So I had a client for a while that all her kid would eat was Go-Gurts. And the shame she carried, he should be eating more. Why isn't he interested in these things? I serve him all this food. What am I doing wrong? I said, he's eating. Maybe that's where he's at right now. Like maybe we don't have to make this a thing right now. Like maybe you're not a bad mom because your kid's just eating some Go-Gurt. Like it's, what if we just allowed that possibility? So I always think about, I was like, well, I really should be doing this. I should be doing this as a mom. Questioning why and really being honest with yourself about the driving force. If it's shame driven, it's going to be something externally motivated. I don't want other people to see. I'm worried about this. People are going to think this about me, whatever that might look like. And so if you go through that and you're like, okay, I've got shame. This is here. This is part of my storyline. The shift really to thinking about shame resilience comes back to control and values. So what I think a lot about is radical acceptance is the idea of learning what I can control, what I can't, and letting go of the things that I can't. So for example, I can't control whether or not other people think I'm a good mom. I can't control whether or not Everly is going to sleep. I can't control whether or not she's going to eat. I can't control if she likes me, but I can control the choices that I make and the reactions that I have in any interaction. So if we're at the supermarket and I have a reaction, I cannot care about whether or not the people like me or not around me because I can't control it. And if I get fixated here, then I'm going to be, it's the kid having the tantrum in the store. Nobody is upset at you for your kid having a tantrum. Nobody's thinking anything. Some people are going to look at you because it's a loud sound and they're reacting because that's their body's reaction. That doesn't mean that they're judging you. And when you are shushing it and shutting it down and not taking the moment, you're doing it because you feel like a good mom should stop the tantrum. I'm not an inconvenience to other people around me. And then my kid is a good kid. And so saying my kid's having a tantrum, I'm just going to be here with it. I can't control what they think. The second part of that then is thinking about what are your values? What are the most important things to you? When you know what your values are, you are able to then direct your actions to the value rather than the fear. So when we go back to that question of why, when I say things like, I want Everly to have at least a fruit and vegetable at every meal, and we say why, it's I want to continue to expose her to different things and to notice what her texture preferences are, to pay attention to things that she likes. I want to teach her to have a healthy relationship with food. As an eating disorder therapist, I'm very conscious of body image and having a very well kind of balanced idea of health. And so we also talk about like if she's going to have a treat, like if we have a brownie or something, we either have it as a separate thing or it's served with her meal. And when it's like, gosh, why am I doing that? Because my value is balance. And I don't want her to think that there's any reason why she should feel bad or that she has to eat certain foods before she can have a dessert. I just want to do it. That's my value. Now, somebody might not agree with that, but when I get clear on I'm doing this because it's what's important to me, what they think or don't think about me doesn't weigh in as much. So I know I just gave everybody like a 17,000 step piece, but the idea is reflect on those questions and then really sort of that next 1% is what can I control? What do I have to grieve and let go of? And how can I tether those controllables to my values so that my actions are really intrinsically motivated and rooted rather than extrinsically sourced?
Mm. So good, everything you said. And it just reminds me the intrinsic versus external. I'm Gretchen Rubin and her
Yeah.
410 test. Like, I remember taking that and just being, just like, are you driven more by internal, external
Yep.
expectations? And it's just helpful to know. And it's
Yep.
helpful then to say what you're saying, like to decide, do I want to keep being driven by that? Is that actually
Mhm.
helping me or serving me? Or so that's so powerful. But I know you gave those questions were amazing. So definitely go back and listen, ladies. But you also have a free gift that could help them actually apply this. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I actually think, as we're talking, you're going to cut this a little bit. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to switch it. To help you do all of the work that we just talked about, I'm going to give you 3 worksheets. So the first is going to be 5 very specific things that people that are practicing shame resilience are doing every day. And this is not meant for you to say, well, now I have to do these 5 things and do them perfectly, and then everything is going to be great. No, this is just giving you bite-sized pieces to think about and to reflect on where and how shame is coming into play and how you could maybe start to make those shifts. But the other 2 things I want to give you are the handouts to basically do exactly what I just said about radical acceptance and values-driven living. So I'll give you a values worksheet. It's going to take you in depth into really thinking about what your values are. What do those look like? Naming them, defining them, getting very clear on the actions that align with them. So if I am living in line with my value for creativity, what does that look like as a mom? What does that look like as a business owner? Whatever that is for you, and you can apply it to all your different roles. And then I'm going to give you something called the control wheel, which is the tool that we use in therapy, but it's very simple. And the worksheet will explain exactly how to do it. But essentially, what you're doing is you're considering any specific role or interaction, and you are literally putting inside of a circle what you can control, and then outside of the circle what you can't. And it is watching that physical movement of items in and outside of a circle that really helps your brain start to create some boundaries. So then you can focus on all those things in the circle. And I think going back to that, reflecting on where am I getting pulled to the outside circle? Like at the end of the day, my daughter is not suffering in terms of her reading and her storytelling and her imagination because I haven't rotated her books in a month, or because I haven't changed up the toys and made sure that she's visually got them in a certain spot and she's only using these things, or I'm practicing this one Montessori thing. She's fine. So if I can start to get clear on, I want to help make sure that we don't have too many toys. So I'm not going to just have a bunch of stuff because I don't want to create that clutter. And I grew up in a home where I was given so much stuff and not enough love. So that's important to me. Whether or not I rotate them and they're set up a certain way and her playroom looks beautiful, don't care because it doesn't actually connect to my value and what I want to do for her. So coming back to that. So we'll make sure that everybody has all 3 of those so you can really decide, where am I at? What am I ready to do? And take whatever that next 1% journey looks like for you in this process.
I love it. I mean, I think those 3 things are such great application tools for everything you shared. Well, as we wrap up, is there one last piece of tip or encouragement you want to leave to the moms around this topic?
I think just if you can find somebody, whether it's another mom, if it is even one of us and messaging us or somebody else you connected with in the summit, just say the things out loud that you're telling yourself you are afraid for someone to find out. All those horrible, scary, worrisome thoughts that you have, just say them out loud. Just start putting them out into the universe so you can have the opportunity for someone else to reflect. That doesn't make you bad. This doesn't mean you're screwing up. All of us have days that we feel like if we could temporarily forget we were a parent for just an hour, I want to come back to her, but I need like a solid hour, sometimes a solid day where I could just forget that I'm a mom and know like she's safe and then hit the button. I just need to do that because sometimes it's hard. I'm empathy overloaded sometimes. And it's okay to say that. And when we say those things out loud, we're like, gosh, I don't really like my kid today. And I'm worried that makes me a bad mom. And for someone else to say, I didn't like my kid the last 3 months, I'm not a bad mom either. Like it just helps. And so if you can find someone to start saying those thoughts and fears out loud to, what we're doing then is creating that space of shared vulnerability and it sheds light on those thoughts. It is literally the antidote to shame. Connection through vulnerability is the antidote to shame. So find someone, talk through it. It's going to be scary, and only until it's not. Because once you see that people are relating to it, you're going to be able to take that deeper breath and live in alignment with what's important to you.
Oh man, I love it. Yes, I just think what we most need sometimes is that connection, yet it's the hardest thing to go out there and ask for. So I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I mean, I just took so many great notes. I know I've interviewed you before, but you always have great insight. So um,
Thank you.
make sure you head and go grab those 3 worksheets, everyone. Go to the Facebook group and share your takeaways, ask Kira your questions, and yeah, go check out VIP Access if you want to listen to this over and over again. So thanks so much again.